Welcome back to BYoungMinistry.com, to another blog and to another podcast. Today we continue in Revelation chapter 9, verses 13 through 19, which reads, "The sixth angel sounded his trumpet, and heard a voice coming from the four horns of the golden altar, that is before God. It said to the sixth angel, who had the trumpet, 'Release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates.' And the four angels who had been kept ready for this very hour, and day, and month, and year, were released to kill a third of mankind. The number of the mounted troops was twice 10,000 times 10,000. I heard their number. The horses and riders I saw in my vision looked like this. Their breastplates were fiery red, dark blue, and yellow as sulfur. The heads of the horses resembled the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke, and sulfur. A third of mankind was killed by the three plagues of fire, smoke, and sulfur that came out of their mouths. The power of the horses was in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails were like snakes, having heads with which they inflicted injury." That's Revelation chapter 9, verses 13 through 19. Today we return to our study of the book of the Revelation. Particularly, we are in chapter 9. In today's text, the sixth angel sounds the sixth trumpet. As a result, the Apostle John hears a voice that comes from the horns of the golden altar. This altar was seen in Revelation chapter 8. There we saw the altar of incense, on which was offered before God the prayers of believers who were then on the earth. An angel took the fire from the altar and threw it back on the earth, and fire and judgment followed. What happens now under the sixth trumpet is an answer to the prayers of those believers of that day. In verses 14 and 15 we read, "It said to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, 'Release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates.' And the four angels who had been kept ready for this very hour, and day, and month, and year, were released to kill a third of mankind." This second woe is God's specific answer to the prayer for God to judge evil. Notice the answer takes the form of releasing four powerful fallen angels who have been bound for centuries at the Euphrates River. Incredible is the sovereign control of God. This event is a precisely timed event according to His will, as are all things. Not that He causes evil, but He allows it. These four angels are released at the very hour and day and month and year that God had long ago predetermined. This is all linked with the Euphrates River. Once the ancient boundary between east and west, the Euphrates River flows out of the mountains of Armenia down through Iraq and Iran and onto the Persian Gulf. In the ancient world, it formed the eastern boundary of the Roman Empire. The Romans lived in constant fear of the Parthian hordes who lived on the other side of the river. Earlier, Israel had also lived in fear of invasion from across the Euphrates because Assyria and Babylonia both had sent their armies down from the north across the river and into Israel. In verse 16 we read, "The number of the mounted troops was twice 10,000 times 10,000. I heard their number." This army is entirely composed of soldiers from the eastern nations, probably China, India, and Japan. The reference to the Euphrates River indicates that a barrier is being removed so the eastern armies can come into the west. In Revelation 16, we find the Euphrates River appearing again, and this time it is linked with the Mount of Megiddo in Israel, or Armageddon. This is the first glimpse we have in Revelation of the great armies of earth that will eventually come from all directions, east, south, north, and west, and gather in the plain of Megiddo in the land of Israel for that last great battle of the last days. In verse 17 of our text, we read, "The horses and riders I saw in my vision looked like this. Their breastplates were fiery red, dark blue, and yellow as sulfur. The heads of the horses resembled the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke, and sulfur." This is modern warfare described in military terms of John's day. Breastplates of various colors suggest armored chariots, which will likely be tanks, missile launchers, and other vehicles of war that are camouflaged. Lions' mouths that are spouting fire and belching smoke suggest cannons or mortars, perhaps even nuclear missiles, killing with fire, radiation, and poisonous gases. In verses 18 and 19 we read, "A third of mankind was killed by the 3 plagues of fire, smoke, and sulfur that came out of their mouths. The power of the horses was in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails were like snakes, having heads with which they inflict injury." Tails like snakes that do injury perhaps describe modern helicopters, gunships, which have a rotor at the tail, where also machine guns and missile launchers are located. This may even depict weapons not yet invented. Here we have a great military campaign, which results in monstrous slaughter of an enormous scope. We are gradually being informed of what is about to happen, and we will see other pictures of these same events as we work through this book of the Revelation. Here in the blowing of the 6th trumpet, the people of earth have ignored all of God's powerful warnings, all of his calls of mercy and offers of grace. It is at this point that these will see death come upon them as never before. Judgment, fierce and indestructible, will not have their proper effect on mankind. So deceived will the people on the earth be, they will refuse to repent, thinking God is to blame for their demise. The appeals of hell will totally drown out God's merciful cry to provide help. In fact, they will curse the God of heaven. They will make their choice to become the companions of Satan forever. And that is what the remainder of this chapter is all about. We will consider its conclusion tomorrow. My friends, I trust this blog and this podcast are helping you in your walk with the Lord. If I can be of further assistance to you, don't hesitate to shoot me an email at BYoungMinister@gmail.com. Hey, have a great day.